Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna be reacting to a video called The Entire History of Spain. This is from a channel called This Is History. So the entire history of Spain, this is gonna take a while. So let's check it out and comment, like and subscribe.
Human habitation in Spain dates back hundreds of thousands of years. These prehistoric peoples eventually developed into Neolithic farming communities and the distinctive Bronze Age cultures of Iberia. By the dawn of the Iron Age in the first millennium BC, the peninsula was a mosaic of tribes and trading colonies. Indigenous groups included the Iberians along the Mediterranean coast, Celtic peoples in the interior and northwest, the Lusitanians in the west, and the Tartessians in the southwest.
That's Portugal these days.
At the same time, seafaring
And in the
civilizations from the eastern Mediterranean had established outposts along the western coastline, particularly Phoenician traders, who founded settlements like Gadir, modern-day Cadiz, as early as the 9th century BC.
That's so old.
Greek colonists also arrived during the 7th to 6th centuries BC, establishing settlements of their own at sites such as Empúries in Catalonia. By the 5th to 4th centuries BC, Carthage, a Phoenician successor state in North Africa, extended its influence over southern Iberia, controlling former Phoenician colonies and new bases like Carthago Nova, modern Cartagena. Iberia remained a patchwork of such powers, both native and foreign alike, until the 3rd century BC, when it became a battleground for the two
This is so old that Rome has just entered the picture.
ancient superpowers of the
Which is
age,
so old.
Carthage and Rome. During the Second Punic War, fought from 218 to 201 BC, Hannibal Barca famously marched from Spain across the Alps against Rome, but ultimately the Romans defeated Carthage and expelled the Carthaginians from Iberia by 206 BC. Over the next 2 centuries, Rome gradually conquered the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, facing stiff resistance from local tribes, notably the Celtiberians. The Roman conquest was completed in 19 BC under Emperor Augustus, after the Cantabrian Wars in the far north. Thereafter, the region was firmly integrated into the Roman world as Hispania. The Romans built many cities across the territory, such as modern-day Tarragona, Merida, and Zaragoza, as well as roads, aqueducts, and other infrastructure.
Very pretty.
Hispania's economy flourished, exporting commodities like grain, olive oil, wine, and metals to other parts of the empire.
I love that not a lot has changed. It's still the same things that they're famous for.
Over time, the local inhabitants adopted the Latin language and Roman customs, becoming increasingly Romanized.
Yeah.
Hispania even produced some of Rome's most influential figures, including the philosophers Seneca and Lucan, the poet Martial, and the emperors Trajan and Hadrian. By the late Roman period, the territory of Hispania had been thoroughly Romanized, laying the groundwork for the emergence of early Spanish culture, including the Spanish language, which evolved from the Latin introduced by the Romans, as well as the spread of Christianity, which rapidly became dominant across the region. As the Western Roman Empire began to collapse in the early 5th century AD, several migrating Germanic tribes invaded and ultimately settled across Iberia. In the early 400s, waves of Vandals, Suebi, and Alans crossed the Pyrenees and seized different regions. The Suebi established a kingdom in Galicia, and the Vandals took control of parts of the south. Before long, however, another Germanic people, the Visigoths, entered Hispania around 415 AD and gradually unified the peninsula under their rule.
Oh my god.
Centered first in Toulouse, in modern France, and later in Toledo, the Visigothic kingdom expelled or subdued the other tribes, and also pushed out the Byzantine Greek enclave in the south that had been established some time earlier. By the late 6th century, the Visigothic kingdom of Toledo governed nearly all of Iberia, lasting for over 2 centuries as a successor Roman state, preserving many of the laws, customs, culture, and religion of the Hispano-Roman population.
Well, let's go sort of the same then.
In 711 AD, a momentous invasion changed the course of Spanish history forever. An army of Muslim Arabs and Berbers from North Africa, under Tariq ibn Ziyad, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and landed in Iberia. They took advantage of an ongoing Visigothic civil war and won a decisive victory over King Roderick at the Battle of
I didn't know that they sort of took advantage of internal sort of conflicts in order to conquer.
Guadalete. Following this, the Muslim forces, led by Tariq and his superior Musa ibn Nusayr, swept rapidly across the peninsula. By 718 AD, the invaders, known to Europeans as Moors, had conquered almost the entirety of Iberia. The region came to be known
Still, for some places sort of resisted, but
as Al-Andalus under Muslim rule, with only a small area in the mountainous north remaining outside their control,
And there's a
eventually
little bit of,
forming
I think in Catalonia and some other places also, they were quite, you couldn't really reach them, so they remained the
the
same.
Christian kingdom of Asturias. The Islamic conquest inaugurated a vibrant new era. Muslim Spain became a province of the vast Umayyad Caliphate. But when that empire fragmented during the Abbasid Revolution in the 8th century, an independent Muslim polity was declared. First as the Emirate of Cordoba under Abd al-Rahman I in 756, and later as the Caliphate of Cordoba under Abd al-Rahman III in 929. Under Muslim rule, Spain witnessed a remarkable flourishing of science, philosophy, medicine, art, and architecture as part of the Golden Age, which spread across the wider Islamic world.
It's crazy to think that this is so old and there's still so much architecture left over from this centuries. It's crazy to think about.
There was also a significantly higher degree of religious tolerance than in many contemporary European kingdoms. The city of Cordoba itself boasted libraries and universities that were among the most advanced in Europe at the time.
That sounds nice.
Al-Andalus also became immensely prosperous, witnessing the introduction of new crops, such as rice, and irrigation techniques from the Muslim world.
It's kind of insane to think of a world without rice. It's sort of like such a normal grain, and it was established in this time period. It's kind of crazy. It's rice.
As well as becoming renowned for its production of silk and steel. Many of Spain's architectural marvels were constructed during this era of Muslim rule, including the iconic Great Mosque of Cordoba and, later, the Alhambra Palace in Granada.
It's insane.
Politically, however, Muslim Spain began to fragment over time. The unified Caliphate of Cordoba disintegrated in the early 11th century into smaller principalities called taifas, which frequently competed with one another. This fragmentation made it easier for the Christian kingdoms of the north, which had emerged out of the earlier Kingdom of Asturias, to begin reclaiming territory.
Correct.
Over the ensuing centuries, the frontier between Islamic and Christian Spain shifted back and forth, as power waxed and waned on each side. Figures such as El Cid exploited the feuding power dynamics to carve out territories for themselves, but by the turn of the 13th century, the northern Christian kingdoms of Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal had consolidated and began to push their frontiers further south as part of the centuries-long conflict against the Muslims known as the Reconquista. Alarmed by the Christian
like 1,000 years?
advances, the Muslim Taifa kings sought help from powerful Berber dynasties in North Africa. The Almoravids, and later the Almohads, were Islamic fundamentalist empires that crossed from Morocco into Spain to reinforce Muslim defences.
Yeah, of course.
The decisive turning point came in the year 1212 at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, where a coalition of Christian kings won a crushing victory over the Almohads and rapidly overran most of Al-Andalus in the aftermath. By 1250, nearly the entire peninsula was under Christian control, with the sole exception of the Emirate of Granada in the far south. This last remaining Muslim enclave survived for 2 more centuries by paying tribute to Castile and skillfully navigating the
But still, the fact that they remained for 2 centuries, I think that's quite a feat.
Political landscape. Meanwhile, the various Christian kingdoms continued to consolidate, forming the early foundations of a unified Spain. By the late 15th century, however, the crowns of Castile and Aragon had been joined through the marriage of Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II in 1469. These Catholic monarchs operated in unison to consolidate their power and direct their combined forces against the last Muslim stronghold of Granada, which fell in 1492, ending the 781 years of Islamic rule in Iberia. In that same fateful year, the king and queen made 2 further momentous decisions. First, they expelled Spain's remaining population who refused to convert to Christianity, extending the remit of the Spanish Inquisition, whose task it was to enforce the religious uniformity of the Catholic faith. The Inquisition targeted converted conversos and later converted Muslims, Moriscos, suspected of secretly practicing their old religions. Secondly, they agreed to sponsor Christopher Columbus's voyage westward across the Atlantic Ocean,
Quite an important
which ushered in a
decision.
new era that would place Spain on the path to global prominence. In October of that
And that's without getting into the conquering of the islands, the Canary Islands and the others. That's the Balearic Islands as well.
year,
But that
Columbus
was
landed in the
earlier.
Bahamas, opening the door to the European discovery of the Americas. Over the following decades, Spanish conquistadors explored and conquered vast territories in the New World, including the powerful native empires of the Aztecs and Incas. These territorial gains gave rise to the Spanish Empire, one of the largest ever in history, which at its height in the 18th century encompassed nearly all of South and Central America,
Yeah, it's a lot.
Mexico, Florida, parts of what is now the United States, colonies in the Asia Pacific, such as the Philippines, and outposts in Africa. The immense wealth
that's
that
true.
flowed into Spain's treasury, especially silver and gold from mines in Mexico and Peru, made it one of the most powerful and wealthy
And rich.
nations on earth. Yet Spain's imperial expansion was not confined
They probably literally like, we struck gold, literally. Like, we just did. We're going to be rich.
to the New World. In 1516, the throne passed to Charles I, the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. Charles became better known as Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, having inherited not only Spain, but also the Habsburg realms across Central Europe. As a result, Charles V ruled an empire upon which it was said that the sun never set. He will
Oh, really? I thought they said that about the British Empire, not about the Spanish one.
simultaneously king of Spain, which included Castile, Aragon, Naples,
Probably a lot of empires can say the same thing. So yeah, it's like, take it if you take it if the shoe fits, then take it.
and its New World colonies, and Holy Roman Emperor, making him the most powerful monarch of the era.
Wow.
However, this immense territorial inheritance brought considerable challenges.
Of course.
The administration of Spanish royal authority
You're managing so many territories and so many places that it's quite hard to maintain control and to stay in power for a really long time. Because again, it's really hard.
was centralized under Charles V's son, Philip II, who established a new capital at Madrid in 1561. Even so, many of the Habsburg territories faced internal and external pressures.
Correct.
Much of Northern Europe was in the midst of the Protestant Reformation in the mid-16th century, and Spain, as the leading Catholic power in Europe, committed significant resources to defending the faith.
That's
This
crazy.
included efforts to suppress the Dutch revolt in the Low Countries, which ultimately led to the independence of the Dutch Republic, and conflict with England, most notably the ill-fated expedition of the Spanish Armada in 1588.
Oh, it was that in Ireland? I think it's constantly in conflict. You're constantly fighting. I don't know what's, you're good at it. And yes, of course, you have this huge empire. But at what cost? If you're constantly fighting other people, you're constantly in conflict. You're never as comfortable as you can be. It's like, oh my God, these poor people. Well, I guess they brought it on themselves. But still, it's kind of, you're never at peace.
Meanwhile, the Mediterranean became a key front in the struggle between Christianity and Islam, as the
There's always
expanding
something.
Ottoman Empire posed a significant threat. In 1571, Philip II joined forces with Venice and the papacy to decisively defeat the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Lepanto. In 1580, Philip also inherited the Portuguese crown, resulting in the Iberian Union between Spain and Portugal.
More
This
things,
union
more
lasted for
places.
60 years and brought together their vast overseas empires under a single monarch.
Yeah,
The late
that didn't last
16th
long.
and early 17th centuries marked the height of Spain's golden age, not only in terms of imperial might, but also
Literature.
in cultural achievement.
Yeah.
It was a period of flourishing art and literature, fueled by royal patronage and the wealth of empire. Celebrated painters such as El Greco, Diego Velázquez, and Murillo created some
What I love about this painting is that you can see him, the painter, painting the actual. It's sort of like a mirror, and it reflects themselves. I think like this is a great painting.
of their most iconic works, while
Yes.
writers like Miguel de Cervantes penned enduring masterpieces such as Don Quixote. Architectural wonders like the Royal Palace of El Escorial were also completed during this time. Yet,
I think, well, yeah, it's a huge palace, but I think, I don't know, in comparison to the others, I think it looks quite quaint, I think, in comparison to others I've seen. It's just less, I don't know, it's crazy to think because obviously this thing is huge, but still, it's kind of, could be more, I don't know, could look more expensive. That's how I would call it.
Even as this cultural renaissance was unfolding, Spain's political and economic fortunes were beginning to decline. The 1600s saw Spain become embroiled in the 30 Years' War, as well as other pan-European conflicts that further drained its strength.
Yeah.
Multiple crises occurred throughout the century. Portugal successfully restored its independence, ending the Iberian Union in 1640. Revolts in Catalonia and territorial losses to France, formalized in the Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659, further eroded Spain's standing in European affairs. By the time the ineffectual Charles II, who was physically and mentally frail,
is that the Habsburg that was, well, had health concerns because of, everyone, like their parents, his parents, I think, were cousins or something not if their parents are cousins, yeah, sure, that I think it's not that well, it is a big deal, but I think you can overcome this. But I think that his family and like his grandparents were, I don't know, like uncle and aunt, and then like his parents were also cousins, and he had a lot of health issues because of it. Is that it?
Generations of Habsburg inbreeding died in 1700 without an heir. Spain was a dramatically weakened power.
I mean, sorry to him, but it's best if he didn't really have any kids, because sometimes nature is smart. If you have that much inbreeding, I think it comes a point in which nature is like, you know what, no,
the death of the last Spanish Habsburg king sparked a major European conflict, the War of the Spanish Succession. Competing claims to the Spanish throne pitted the French Bourbon dynasty against the Austrian Habsburgs, along with their respective allies. A lengthy war followed, with battles fought across Europe and in Spain itself, as local factions supported different claimants.
Of course.
The war ended in 1714, with the Treaty of Utrecht, and Philip V, the French candidate, was recognized as King of Spain. Although he was forced to cede some territories, with Britain taking possession of Gibraltar and Minorca for a time as part.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering what territories he had to cede. Well, I guess, again, they'll have to lose something, but sometimes in order to win, you kind of have to lose
the peace process. Under the new Bourbon rulers, Spain embarked on a program of reform and centralization. Philip V and his successors introduced French-style absolutist policies aimed at modernizing the administration and economy, inspired in part by Enlightenment ideas. In the mid-18th century, King Charles III implemented numerous Enlightenment-inspired reforms, promoting science and academia, investing in infrastructure like roads and canals, modernizing agriculture and commerce, and reducing the power of the church. These initiatives, known as the Bourbon reforms, sought to revitalize a stagnating economy and streamline governance in both Spain and its colonies. By the end of the century,
again, it's a hard job. You have to maintain peace in a lot of territories. It couldn't have been
Spain
easy.
had regained some prestige and made progress in modernization, though it remained far from the dominance it had enjoyed in the 16th century.
They were in their flop era, basically.
Moreover, trouble was once again looming on the horizon.
Around the corner, there's, again, with empires like this, problems and trouble is constantly around the corner.
French Revolution and the emergence of Napoleon Bonaparte upended Europe in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and Spain was no exception. Initially an ally of Napoleonic France, Spain's fortunes shifted in 1808, when Napoleon seized the Spanish throne and installed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte.
He's like, oh, you're my friend? Wait, why are you doing this?
This provoked a mass uprising on the 2nd of May, 1808, when the people of Madrid rebelled against French occupation, an event famously depicted by the painter Francisco Goya. The rebellion quickly spread, launching the Peninsular War. Spanish regulars, local militias, and guerrilla fighters took up arms against the French occupiers. The British, led by Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, allied with the Spanish resistance and Portuguese forces to fight the French. The war was brutal, with
And there's a joke somewhere there of Britain never... He's like, oh, we are fighting France? Yeah, sure, I'm in.
atrocities committed on both sides. After years of bloody conflict, the French were gradually worn down, and by 1814, Napoleon's troops were driven out of Spain. While Spain fought for its own liberty, Her colonies in the Americas seized the moment to pursue their own freedom.
Yeah, back in the other side.
Beginning in the 1810s, inspired by the American and French revolutions, Spanish America rose in revolt. By 1825, nearly all of Spain's colonies, including Mexico, Gran Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and others, had won independence after years of bloody struggle. Spain was left with only a few overseas territories, her island colonies in the Caribbean and the Philippines.
Oh yeah, like Cuba, Puerto Rico.
The loss of its empire dealt a devastating blow to Spain's economy and global prestige, yet more instability followed throughout the 19th century.
Well, probably other emperors were, oh, you lost your colonies. But hey, everyone's losing colonies these days.
King Ferdinand VII, whose reign veered between absolutism and liberalism, died in 1833, leaving the crown to his daughter, Isabella II. However, his brother, Don Carlos, contested the succession, sparking the First Carlist War, a brutal civil conflict between liberals supporting Isabella and traditionalists backing Carlos. Although Isabella's cause prevailed, Carlist uprisings would re-emerge repeatedly during the century. Despite securing her position, Isabella II's reign was plagued by political instability, military coups, and factionalism.
Yeah.
There were signs of modernization, with the emergence of railways, industrial growth, and fledgling liberal reforms across the country. Nevertheless, her popularity plummeted, and she was eventually deposed in 1868.
I wonder why her popularity crumbled. She wasn't all that popular to begin with, I guess, but still, like, what happened?
This ushered in a brief period of political experimentation. In 1870, the Italian Amedeo I became king, but he abdicated after only 3 tumultuous years. The resulting First Spanish Republic,
Heavy is the crown, that's what they say.
Quickly collapsed also amid internal divisions and renewed Carlist violence. The Bourbon dynasty was restored in 1875, with Isabella's son, King Alfonso XII, taking the throne. A new
It's like all of that to arrive at the guy that still was going
constitution was introduced, along with a political system based on alternating conservative and liberal governments in an attempt to stabilize the country.
Yeah.
This
normalized.
period brought a degree of political calm to a beleaguered Spain. Yet further humiliation followed in the final years of the century with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in 1898.
Humiliation? That sounds harsh.
What began as US support for Cuban independence quickly escalated into a disastrous war that stripped Spain of all its remaining major overseas colonies: Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. The disaster of '98 plunged Spain into a period of soul-searching, and with its empire practically gone, the country turned its attention to Africa, establishing a colonial foothold in Morocco in the early 20th century.
It's like, well, if I can't have that, I don't know, I'm gonna search. I'm gonna look out for what exactly I can still get.
Although King Alfonso XIII kept Spain neutral during World War I, which briefly boosted the economy.
Oh yeah, the African king, right? That's how he was called, the African.
Post-war crises soon followed.
Wasn't he that
In
guy?
1921, Spanish troops suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Berber tribesmen in Morocco.
Get humiliating.
The event became a national scandal
Yeah,
and
he was that
fueled
guy.
widespread discontent among the military. By 1923, General Miguel Primo de Rivera staged a coup d'etat, establishing a dictatorship with the king's support.
The first of
The
many.
constitution was suspended, and Primo de Rivera ruled autocratically as prime minister. Though the regime was born of illegitimacy, it enjoyed early success, ending the Moroccan conflict, stabilizing
Wow.
the economy, and investing in infrastructure.
Well, I guess,
However,
yeah, people
by
were happy
1930,
early on.
amid economic downturn and eroding support, the regime unraveled. The monarchy, tainted by its association with the dictatorship, soon collapsed.
Yeah, you can see why everything that happened afterwards, what happened basically. It was a very, I think, it was a lot of conflict. I don't know. They weren't that conflict averse. It was just, they set the basis for what came later. And it's really like, oh, you can really see it amplified here.
In April 1931, elections showed overwhelming support for Republican candidates, prompting King Alfonso XIII to go into exile. The Second Spanish Republic was swiftly proclaimed. The Republic introduced sweeping reforms: a secular constitution, women's suffrage, land redistribution, regional autonomy, and curbs on church and military power. Although
technically all
these
good things on
changes
paper.
alienated many
Technically.
conservative elements within the country, leading to
Yeah.
further political polarization and violence.
I think that's the problem. I think you want to advance, culture and society, but if people are not there yet, this kind of things happen.
Throughout the early 1930s, a series of narrowly won elections swung Spain's political fortunes left and right, until in July 1936, military officers led by Francisco Franco launched.
Another coup d'etat.
However, they failed
another.
to win support across the entire country, thus triggering the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War. The nationalists, led by Franco, and comprising monarchists and clergy, faced the Republicans, who were made up of liberals, socialists, communists, and anarchists. The war
many
quickly
people.
became internationalized against the broader geopolitical backdrop of the time.
Correct.
Germany and Italy backed Franco, while the Soviet Union, along with many international volunteers, supported the Republic. The war was brutal, with both sides committing atrocities, such as the bombing of Guernica. Eventually, the nationalists, through better organization and greater support, triumphed when they captured Madrid in 1939, and Franco promptly declared victory. An estimated
another
350,000 Spaniards died in the conflict, and hundreds of thousands fled abroad, leaving behind a country that was shattered, traumatized, and now under a new dictatorship. Franco established an authoritarian, ultra-conservative state. The monarchy was suspended.
This picture is chilling. It's, oh my god, it gives me goosebumps.
Falange became the only legal party, and thousands of Republicans were executed or imprisoned. The regime promoted Catholicism, censored dissent, and suppressed regional languages and identities such as Basque, Catalan, and Galician, in favor of a unified Spanish identity rooted in Castilian culture. During the Second World War, although sympathetic to the Axis powers, Franco kept Spain officially neutral, sparing the country from the destruction that engulfed much of the continent. After the war, Spain was somewhat politically isolated, but the onset of the Cold War changed this. Western powers, valuing Franco's staunch anti-communism, re-engaged with his regime and opened military bases in exchange for financial aid. In the 1950s and 60s, Franco's government implemented liberal economic reforms, giving rise to the so-called Spanish Miracle, during which rapid industrialization, tourism, and foreign investment transformed Spain into a modern economy. Living standards rose, though inequality and repression persisted, particularly
Correct.
among students and regional nationalists.
Yeah.
As the
It's still kind of an improvement, but things were great.
1970s began, many Spaniards began to wonder what would happen once the aging and childless Franco passed away. He named Prince Juan Carlos, grandson of Alfonso XIII, as his successor, hoping to preserve Francoism for years to come. However, when Franco died in 1975 and Juan Carlos ascended the throne, he surprised many by leading Spain's peaceful transition to democracy.
Yes.
He appointed reformists.
A really, really tough job to have. You have to maintain, you're technically appointed. You have to sort of, people are wondering, are you going to maintain the other regime? Or are you not? I mean, it wasn't an easy job, I'll say
Adolfo
that.
Suarez as prime minister, legalized political parties, and held free elections
Yes.
in 1977.
Because you have to open
A
things up.
new democratic constitution followed in 1978, establishing a parliamentary monarchy and recognizing Spain's regional diversity through a system of autonomous communities. The remaining decades of the 20th century saw democratic Spain integrate into the Western world.
Again, really tough job to have. You have to start to integrate. You have to start opening things up after decades of, things not being that
NATO
great.
in 1982 and the European Economic Community in 1986. The nation experienced prosperity and global prominence never seen before, symbolized by hosting the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. This prosperity continued into the new millennium, but the global financial crisis of 2008 brought much of this progress to a halt, leading to massive unemployment and the implementation of austerity measures to stabilize the
Everyone's
country's
having a bad
faltering
time.
finances. In the years since, Spain has put itself on the path to recovery, showing signs of a revitalized economy. Although it continues to face internal challenges, such as the Catalan independence movement and questions about the future role of the monarchy, Spain today stands as the stable, democratic nation it has long aspired to be. having resiliently endured centuries of turmoil, division, and constant transformation that have come to define its past.
Yeah, again, a lot of history is summarized. I think I skipped over a few parts. Obviously, if they hadn't, we'd be here a really long time. I think that, yes, it does amplify, I think, what the country has, obviously in order to understand probably, what a country and what a culture is like, I say like this as a modern person, you also have to understand and you really have to familiarize a little bit. Obviously, you're not going to be an expert, but you have to familiarize a little bit, in case you want to learn. Obviously, you don't have to, but in case you want to learn about a place, about a country, it's important to understand the background and the history, because I think a lot of things I think can become clear once you understand, the background and the history. Because a lot of things start to make sense, a lot of things start clicking, as in, oh yeah, I can see why people are the way they are. I understand why things are done the way they are here. And again, you can only do that by having, some sort of background of what this country has endured, what happened in recent history, and in recent-ish years. Obviously not 10 years, but I mean recent-ish, as in, I don't know, the past 200 years, let's say. I just said a random number, but I think, in order to understand how, how modern times and how modern, I think, political and cultural life works, obviously in this case, in the case of Spain, I think, obviously, again, the whole sort of ancient history and all the tribes and all the ancient people, of course, that's interesting to understand how, how culture, and it's kind of crazy as well, because the Spanish culture as I know it, it's really a combination of a lot of things, obviously, but you can see, oh yeah, it used to be like this, the thousands of years ago, 2,000 years ago. You can still see how the kingdoms and how it's technically it's an autonomous region and everything's an autonomous region these days. But, back then it sort of was the same. I think I love the fact that you can trace back and see what territories are these days and what kind of cities, you name a random city, whatever, what territory, an autonomous territory or a region. And you can trace it back to, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, this is what happened. A lot of the things I think have sort of remained. I mean, yes, technically some of them have not. But still, I think Spain has done, a good job. Of course, a lot of things have been lost. But I think that a lot of the things, a lot of those autonomous regions have remained. And I think it's a testament to how strong, well, I guess it's not about wanting, because I think a lot of cultures all over the world, not just in Spain, that have been, their culture has been tried to take, that has been, other people have tried to take their culture away from them. Not everyone's successful, and it's not because, people don't want to, obviously, but it's a matter of resistance and with a sprinkle of luck, I think, sometimes as well. And in this case, I think Spain, again, has done a sort of, again, not perfect, because, again, nothing's perfect, but still, with all the territories, I think there's a quite distinct, everything, all the regions are, at the same time, of course, they're similar, they're the same country, but still, I think that it really does vary by region, and it's nice to see that, yes, you can trace back their history to so many years, and still you can sort of maybe see how how you fare really well, and still so many things remain from ancient times, which I think is really good. Maybe not ancient as in, 2,000 years, but still, like, maybe from the 1200s or so. Obviously, you have the Muslim influence and the Moors, and that, of course, that also happened, and it left a tremendous mark on the country, of course. Although people, I don't know why, sometimes you tend to forget about this. It's because I think the Catholic history of this country has, it's such a weighted thing because of, Catholicism and Spain. They're two things that have, they've gone together, together hand in hand for so long. And there's, I think, especially in the, let's say since probably the 1400s, obviously by effort of the kings and the queens and the monarchy. But still, it's kind of crazy to think that they've kind of erased the centuries of Muslim sort of invasion, which, again, you can really do see the influence. But I think it's easy to forget just because they did, speaking about doing a good job, they also did, I think, a good job. So all the kings and all of that, all the Catholics king, and Catholicism in general, they sort of like, they did a really good job at trying to erase the other the Muslim centuries. Although again, you can still see it in the architecture. I think not so much in the culture, but I think, in the buildings, a lot of buildings remain, and they're obviously in some regions more than others, but still, it's really, okay, so everything, again, it's a mix between everything that has happened, and it's great. As for the modern sort of history, modern as in, the past, let's say, 100, not even 100 years, well, this is like 100 years, but again, 150 years, as I was mentioning, how you can really do see, because obviously the Spanish Civil War is still quite a recent-ish development, sort of. I know it's like, again, it's 80 years, well, a little bit more than 80 years, the 1930s, but still, it's still sort of recent, fresh in everyone's minds. But it's really sort of important to see how did we arrive at this. It didn't happen overnight. The Spanish Civil War, the dictatorship, all of that. It had a background. It didn't happen overnight, and you can really do see in this video why. All the factors that that made it so that this is happening and this conflict is happening. But okay, again, I know that not all conflicts happen overnight, obviously, but you can really do see how you can trace it back, and this happened because, again, the country was very divided. And why it was divided? It was because of this. And why did that happen? And you can sort of trace it back, sort of, I don't know, like a movie. If this were a movie, you were telling like the plot points, it would be, and this happened because of this other thing that happened. And this video, I think, really does. It's a really good job at explaining how things, happened the way they were, and how sometimes I think people, they make, you may think someone's going to come and it's going to have, better reforms. And, if you're really struggling, and if a culture is really struggling, a society is really struggling, especially I think because of economical reasons, I think that's one of the sort of things that really obviously, again, if people don't have anything to eat, their farms are being taken away, you're not producing enough food to feed your family. All of that, of course, if someone comes and tells you, hey, this has to change, we have to reform this, obviously you're going to be like, yeah, sure, where do I sign? So I think sometimes, like they say, how I said, the saying, the best of intentions pave the road to hell. I think I'm paraphrasing, but still, everything starts, technically you think you're supporting something that's good, and on paper, a lot of these things, they did look good. However, I think if a country that's so divided, it's, you can't change things overnight. And on paper, they seem good because, yeah, sure, it's good. A lot of the reforms, they're not, there weren't anything to criticize. Obviously, again, the dictatorship that came afterwards and all the repression and all of that, again, I'm taking that out of the picture. Still, I think a lot of people may have felt, yeah, this maybe is good, yes, because it fits our needs at this time period, at this specific time period. However, not everything, obviously you don't have, this magic ball that's going to show you the future. You never know if there is decisions that you're taking are going to be okay. But still, on paper, they look good. But again, on a country that's so divided, and that, obviously it happened in Spain, but I think this could be exemplified in so many other places, is that, yes, you may have, the intention of doing something. However, if the country's that divided politically, economically, and there's just a lot of like black and white, is not, no one sort of in the shades of gray, as in, well, let's maybe try to find an equilibrium. You are not going to be able to do that because things like this happen. You can't just say, hey, we're doing this, and people are going to be, okay, yeah, sure, I guess we'll arrive at the middle. No, you kind of have to ease things up, let it be. I think maybe, again, I do not know, but I think maybe this kind of things could be avoided. If people try to ease, you have to ease people into like changing things. You can't just change things because sometimes it does work, but you have to know whether or not that society is sort of ready for things to change, because sometimes a part of the society is ready for things to move on, to change, but again, you have to still, you have to make reforms, you have to change some things, and it's not just because, again, it's sort of like you can't put the blame on anyone specifically because you understand where every side is coming from, basically. And still, because it's sort of the more recent events in this case, the Spanish Civil War and the dictatorship, it's such a sort of raw wound still, I think, in Spain. There's so many, this hasn't healed because it's sort of, again, it's a recent-ish time. Franco died like less than 20 years ago. So it's still, there's still, well, again, more than not 20 years, but still, it's a recent-ish development that still a lot of people remember. It's not something that happened, 300 years ago, and people do not remember this anymore. So this, it's been looming, and I think sort of all the events, from the 1930s onwards, basically, up until the 1970s, it's a raw wound that a lot of people, still sort of looms over a lot of the decisions and a lot of the culture. And I'm not saying, people obviously live their daily lives normally, of course. This is not like, oh, people cannot, live their lives. No, of course, it's normal. But I think a lot of the political decisions that Spain takes, and a lot of the things, I don't know, just a lot of the where the temperature, you can measure sort of the political temperature. A lot of the things are still having to do with this, and it's kind of like, yeah, well, sure, it was a really traumatic event that affected so millions and millions of people. So of course you can understand where exactly this is coming from. And it is kind of, again, they made, a really tough job. The king really had a tough job. He had to basically start to, again, all transition periods are really hard for the people in charge, basically. And you're obviously it didn't do this on its own, but still, you're the face of the monarchy, you're the face of the country, and for the people as well. All transition periods are, everything doesn't change overnight, and if people by that point they were ready, still, it's a rebuilding process. Is you have to change a lot of people's mentality, and again, you can be ready, but still are going to change, and all changes and all transition periods are tough on people and on societies and on culture in general. So again, it was a really tough job. And still, these days, he's still alive. Still, a lot of people remember, where when he rose to power, and when the monarchy was established. So, still, it's a really complicated subject. But yes, I really love this video. I will say though, I skipped a lot of parts, but no, the Balearic Islands, the Canary Islands, they also have their history, and it sort of was a lot of it was skipped over. And yeah, again, we would probably be here a long time, but I would have liked to see a little bit more about their history and how they were conquered and all of that, because again, they are also a region in Spain. They're not peninsular, but still, they are part of Spain, and obviously they have their own culture and all of that, but still, would have liked to see a little bit more. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.